Hi there, Lola. So, more essays from you. Great. Really happy to see it. I see you're working really hard. So, let's take a look at what you wrote. This one is about local food, if it's better for the environment and economy. Let's see what you said. Experts throughout the developing and developed world have debated whether the transportation of food from a different region is worthy, or if it could be severely detrimental in terms of pollution and economy. Some believe that we should instead buy products from local farmers and breeders. Personally, I strongly disagree. This essay will argue that a wide food interchange among different areas is basic for our growth, using examples from the UK government and Oxford University to demonstrate points and prove arguments. Okay. I guess besides that one little area that I already corrected, it was this, is worthy. It's probably not the best word choice here. So, is beneficial would have been a good word. Is advantageous, is a positive development. So one of these things would have been a better word choice. Okay. Other than that, the paragraph is well structured, well written, so no problems. Let's take a look at what you said in the rest of your essay. On the one hand, although there is a case for nonprofit organization, why nonprofit? All right, let's see what you said. Encouraging the development of crops based on native flora and even favoring self-sufficient farming on the top of the roofs. Okay, you could have just said on rooftops. That would have been a better way. The impact of the consumption of a limited range of nutrients cannot be overstated. This is largely because certain citric fruits, citrus, US, such as lemons and tangerines, would not, 2 words, survive extreme climates. Therefore, inhabitants with an IN in the beginning from northern or isolated countries would lack essential vitamins and develop deficiency diseases. For example, an extensive study by Oxford University showed that over 90% of scurvy cases in Iceland during the post-war period were due to the scarcity of lemons. Consistent with this line of thinking is that a rich and varied diet has been one of the main reasons why life expectancy in developed country has been elongated over the last century. Thus, it is possible to state beyond doubt that the transportation of different food is vital for the correct physiology of the human being, avoiding expenses related to health issues. Okay, well written, really nice, convincing, great. I have a concern, though, to be totally honest with you, and my concern is that it's not entirely on topic. You're supposed to be talking about local food and whether it's beneficial to the environment and economy. Instead of doing that, you're talking to me about the health of humans. So it's not really on topic. This all would have been, if you disagree with this argument, then it would have been more appropriate if you had talked about how this is not beneficial to the economy or how it's not beneficial to the environment. But suddenly talking about human health doesn't really fit in with what the question has asked you. Okay? So let's take a look at how you developed it further on. On the other hand, there is ample evidence that the production, manufacturing, and transport of food increases the amount of job opportunities. Some of them are related to the recycling and zero waste aim. The central reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, the necessity of intermediaries to carry out the labor of packaging. Okay, grammatically you're missing something here. You're missing a verb. So the central reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, there is a need for intermediaries. I can't say that word today. Intermediaries to carry out the labor of packaging and delivery. Secondly, a huge amount of materials are used to maintain this controlled chain-based process, and the destination of tons of synthetic, non-biodegradable materials such as plastics is under supervision. For example, recent empirical research, from the UK government demonstrated that 90% of all recycling waste came from the food industry. It must not be forgotten that although traffic could seem a problem, new technologies such as electric cars are being implemented. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that a well-regulated food transport could increase the amount of employment and support the environment as well. Okay. From the arguments and examples given, I firmly believe that the advantages of a global food market outweigh the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. It is predicted that food shipping will increasingly grow in importance. Okay, so let's see how you develop this second paragraph. Okay, I'm going to kind of work through this paragraph because I'm not entirely sure what your message is. So I'm just going to try to think it through aloud, and let's see if I've understood this correctly. So you start here on the other hand, and you say that all of this transport and production of food creates a lot of job opportunities, and some of them are related to recycling. Then you talk about the intermediaries involved. Then this sentence really confused me. What do you mean here is under supervision? That really didn't make sense to me. So this whole thing didn't make sense to me. What are you actually telling me? That the fact that we import food and there's all this packaging and so forth is creating jobs for people in recycling, and that that's somehow a help to the economy? If that's what you're trying to say, it didn't really come across very clearly. You're going to need to kind of reword it, rework some of those sentences in order to make that message come across more clearly. Okay, and then here you talk about 90% of all recycling waste came from the food industry. So what is that supposed to do? Is that supposed to support this claim? Because one could really argue that this is just an argument against transported food, and it's just another reason why we should buy local. So I'm not really convinced about this whole thing. Okay, and then here you had this little part dedicated to traffic. Let's see, you said new technologies such as electric cars are being implemented. I thought if you really wanted to explore that, I thought you should have said maybe a little bit more about that. Maybe given some evidence. You could have said something like, in Finland, for example, 90% of trucks used for transport are using renewable fuels or are electric powered, or something like that. So I thought that there was more to say here. Did you already write quite a bit? Yeah, you did, but it's really important that anytime you do provide a main idea that you support it with some sort of backup and really just develop the answers so that there's not much else to say about it. Okay? Global food markets. Okay, and the conclusion was fine. Yeah, so I had to work through it. Like I said, there was some sections of this paragraph that were a little confusing. Everything was well written. The grammar, the language, the vocabulary, all of that is really well controlled. So good job. But like I said, there are some areas that were a little confusing. All right? Let's now take a look at your task 1. This is the chips. Okay, do remember to try to include the image actually in the file with your answer. It's very helpful when I can refer to it in my correction. Okay, so the graph shows the amount. It's a bar chart actually, right? So why don't we call it a chart? The chart shows the amount of Intel and AMD sales during 2018. The data supplied. No, you misunderstand. You've misunderstood this. They're telling you that Intel and AMD are chip manufacturers. Okay, so you don't actually need to say that it was supplied by chip manufacturers. That's it's not necessary. It's not accurate. So you could have just said the graph shows the amount of Intel and AMD sales during 2018 in France. Okay. As can be seen from the chart, AMD started the year at around 25,000 sales, having the initial, it didn't have anything. It was just half of. You see, when you use a verb like this, you're implying that some change happened between them, that it cut something in half, but it didn't. It instead was half that of Intel, which is a little different. Although it boosted, but boosted is the wrong word. Although it increased and quadrupled in February, reaching its highest peak at around 125,000, followed by July, September, and October with 110, 90, and 80,000 respectively. Okay, so what are you really telling me about AMD? You're telling me January, February, July, September, October. Okay. The sales of Intel increased during the first 3 months, followed by a sudden drop in April and rising again considerably until July, when the second dramatic fall occurred. And and was followed by a plateau period the next 3 months, and it climbed finally just over 100,000 with a subsequent slight fall. All right. There's no data in this paragraph about Intel. You've got 12 months here, 12, and you only told me this one little number here. So that is absolutely underdeveloped in terms of data. You have to supply more. Typically, when I see a graph like this or a chart like this, there are certain pieces of data I expect. I expect to see the beginning, I expect to see the end, and I expect to see some of the key high points and low points in that year. Are you going to give me 12 pieces of data for Intel? No, of course not. But you do have to give me some of those key pieces of information, typically the ones I just said. Okay? Also, don't forget to group some of the similar pieces of data where and whenever you can. All right? Let's see. Now, as far as AMD was concerned, let's say you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data. You never mentioned, and this was strange to me. This was strange. You never mentioned that AMD recorded 0 sales in June, whereas Intel had this enormous peak there. I didn't see that anywhere, and that really belonged in your detailed paragraph. Okay, let's see what you wrote though in your overview. Overall, there was a big fluctuation in AMD and Intel sales during this year. June was the month where the differences between both enterprises were more relevant. That's the wrong word here, relevant. Being the highest amount of sales for Intel at around 125,000 and the lowest for AMD, not obtaining any profit. Okay, that's not an overview because this is actually detail. What you wrote here really belonged in your previous paragraphs. Okay? All this data with 125,000 and so forth, that didn't belong in your overview. Your overview is for basically highlighting what that main thing that really sticks out more than anything in the diagram. Now, for this particular one, it could have been something like overall sales of both companies fluctuated considerably over the year, with June being the month where Intel recorded the most sales and AMD the least. That would be an appropriate overview. You see, there is no data at all, and I simply told you where the highest for one was, and that was it. Okay? So some good elements here, but there are some problems with some of the vocabulary you used and some of the pieces of data that you selected to talk about. In other words, some of the months that you selected, can't really say that you selected the best ones you could have selected. So vocabulary was part of the problem, some of the data you selected, and here that there was almost no data for Intel. And then the misunderstanding here with the overview and what its role is. You're basically trying to give the most obvious, the most basic trend that really just kind of stands out when you look at the data. Okay? Go ahead and correct these essays, return them back to us corrected. Don't forget to add to your error correction list, and let's see how you do with your next set. Okay? I'm looking forward to it. Good luck.